Heard a lot of discussion, Monica. There's some really interesting stats about load management and where we're at in the NBA right now. We've seen so many players injured. We know highlighted last night by the Nets and 76ers where we had no Kevin Durant, we had no James Harden in that game, we had no LaMarcus Aldridge, and now we know that we are in fact not going to see LaMarcus Aldridge anymore. Announced his retirement earlier today because of some heartbeat issues or heart rhythm issues during one of his last games there. No Blake Griffin as well. So as you've looked at this NBA season, Monica, I know I've noticed anecdotally there's been a lot of primetime instances like that, especially post-All-Star, where we haven't had the full volume of players out on the court. I'm just wondering, and I've heard people asking today, do you think it gets to a point where it actually hurts the NBA product overall? Are we actually hitting that now because of all these injuries, because of the shortened pandemic season and the combination of that?
Golic, I think there's two slightly different conversations, though, in what you're saying. Because I think load management of players that are healthy and looking toward the playoffs and what they could do in the real season, right, in terms of chasing an NBA championship, is different from pure injuries. And this year we've had maybe, I'd say a combination of the two. But, I mean, I think people have already forgotten KD is coming back off of, 15-plus games that he missed in this regular season, and then a season and change that he was entirely out. You know what I mean? And so, in theory, your stars not being on the floor, yes, ultimately that affects your bottom line at some point and certainly could be bad for business. But if we're really talking about guys that are injured, like Anthony Davis has an injury history. LeBron James, he's 36. Like, yes, he's been Teflon up until now, but he's 36. Jamal Murray, obviously the headline injury that we've seen this week. Some of that is the game, and we can't control injuries. I think the conversation becomes at what point this idea of load management is really starting to affect the game. And I don't have the answer for that, because I think if we keep going, the bottom line and the dollar signs, all of that is in the playoffs. All of that is in the championship. So you need your players to be ready at that point in the season. If Joe and his dad miss, seeing their favorite star, I'm sorry, get NBA League Pass.
It's, honestly, though, that's kind of where we're at. And I know for the NBA and for all sports, it's going to be a delicate balance of trying to get people back in stadiums after the pandemic. It was already a battle people were fighting on a lot of fronts before that because the TV product, to your point, has become so good. But I'm with you, and I think Jamal Murray is kind of the perfect illustration of that. You would always rather have your stars for the big run you're going to need at the end. Because as long as the NBA offseason continues to be as compelling as it always is, the player movement and the big personalities and that NBA playoff model, that NBA postseason is that potent. I really don't think we're going to talk about these dives in TV ratings or difficulties with the contracts here. And you and I may think that, but I know I heard a very upset Stephen A. Smith earlier today on First Take who had some words for Kevin Durant. Here he was earlier today.
You see what I'm saying? This is that BS that I'm talking about. What we've been looking forward to all day, y'all. What were we talking about this morning? The Brooklyn Nets versus the Philadelphia 76ers. Ben Simmons going to be there. Joel Embiid going to be there. But Kevin Durant, one night after dropping 30, suddenly he ain't playing tonight. LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin just got to Brooklyn. All of a sudden, they ain't going to be available tonight. We know James Harden is injured because that brother don't miss games. And, oh, by the way, Kyrie's not on the injured list, so he might be available tonight, but we don't know. Nationally televised game, two top teams in the Eastern Conference, and KD, James Harden, possibly Kyrie is going with Blake and LaMarcus Aldridge joining them. See what I'm saying? See, it's that BS.
Chiney Golic Jr. here on ESPN Radio, Mike Golic Jr. and Monica McNutt. And man, that man wanted to keep his money after that on that last part. You heard him catch it real quick.
Ooh.
It just makes me so mad. But
Golic, please be eloquent, because I got less than eloquent things to say. But you be eloquent, because you're the pro.
Say the less than eloquent things, because I am here for that. Trust me, I trip over my words all the time around here. We're here for that.
Stephen A., what are we doing? What are we actually doing? Like, he is literally the person that I just described that has forgotten this long time trajectory in terms of recovery for one of the greatest basketball players that we've seen in this generation. I understand that your primetime Wednesday night game, April 14th, is the end all be all. Not. Like, come on. And how often have we seen, this isn't a KD thing. We have seen for at least a decade now, in terms of my recollection and paying close attention to what NBA teams are doing, back-to-backs with your stars and load management is not new. What are you doing? I don't understand how this became a thing. Like, no, sit down, have several seats.
I'm with you. Take all the seats on that one. For Kevin Durant in this spot too, even more understandable because we know this became a back-to-back because of a game that was canceled and moved because of the horrific and tragic events in Minnesota that happened on Sunday. So you've got that. You've got Kevin Durant, a player who's already a 7-foot-tall player with an Achilles injury there. So you want to talk about lower body, that chain of things that you're trying to protect in all this. But as much as anything, when we talk about load management, I thought this was interesting. ESPN's Tim McMahon, citing data provided by the league office, reported the average number of games per week in this 2019-20 or the 2019-20 season was 3.42 games per week. That number jumped to 3.6 in the 2020-21 season, and post All-Star game is at 3.75. So we're jamming more games into these players coming off of a season that was inside a bubble, had a shorter turnaround than any we've seen before, and now we're going to act surprised when these players and these teams are being cautious, and I almost said unnecessarily, but it is highly necessary in this spot because we have all the data about playing in the second night of back-to-backs, 3 games in 4 days, jamming them into certain spots. And now, Monica, I just don't think that especially this year, there's an easy solution to all this. Maybe down the road, and you and I talked about this before the show, maybe you can find something incentive-based that gets these players out here for some of these primetime games that you want. But especially right now, going into this season, it is keep your head down and just try and get out of this thing healthy.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.